It's interesting with this message I was hearing, like, we're so back. We're so back. And then I keep getting something about, like, story of Robin Hood, which, unless you've been actually stealing from the rich and giving to the poor and are back on that bullshit, which I would fully support, I think there may be a little bit of something else here. Kind of want to dig into that. If any of that resonates with you, feel free to stick around and we'll see what comes up. Okay. So, up top here, we've got the Knight of Cups, the Page of Wands, the Four of Cups, the Nine of Pentacles, Eight of Cups, Seven of Swords, Ace of Wands, Eight of Pentacles, and the Lover is kind of just on the end here is almost like a little bit of a guide for a reading. So I feel like you have recently come back into balance with certain parts of yourself. Cause like what I'm kind of seeing with this is almost like this like push and pull in a sense between these two rows. With this like Knight of Cups and the Eight of Cups here, you know, I'm getting like this is coming into balance with the part of you that's like very compassionate and like very heart driven, and not letting that like veer away into escapism type of thing, like actually kind of grounding that, especially with this Nine of Pentacles that we have over here, like grounding that in a way that's like sustainable. And I think like that it almost like allows you to open yourself up to like other parts of you that I think before were maybe a little bit masked by this escapism. It's kind of like when this part of you, this like Knight of Cups, this heart-driven part, when it existed as like an internal sense, as this almost like this daydreamy, like I said, escapism thing, as opposed to like actually existing in the present, it made it harder, I think, for like this like Page of Wands part of you, that's like very free, very adventurous, to really take off. You know, it was kind of like hidden behind this like Seven of Swords here. You know, and the illusion was just your own mind. And I think the idea that you could only really like passionately pursue what it is that you wanted, within your own mind. And I think that like there's kind of interesting with this like Eight of Pentacles under this Nine of Pentacles, you know, there's almost this sense of I haven't worked hard enough. I need to do more. I need to do more. Conflicting with this sense of like, I've done enough, you know, and like, it's okay to appreciate what I have done, and, you know, don't have to be like stuck in this state of constant like improvement, perpetually, not because that's not important, but because you have already improved to a point where I think in this situation, you have the capacity to do what you need to do and to be like grounded and like independent with that, and like actually I'm hearing like sustain yourself, because like the Nine of Pentacles is a lot about like financial independence, honestly, in abundance. And I think that there's this kind of interesting with this like Ace of Wands under the Four of Cups. And what I'm kind of getting with that is that like there may have been in the past like this feeling of whatever it is that I want to do, I'm not good enough for, which, kind of plays into that Eight of Pentacles with the, like, I need to be constantly improving. But I think that there also may have been this sense of, like, needing to constantly start over. And that's not a bad thing when you have the capacity to start over and you have the belief in yourself that, like, if you were to start over, you could make it work. But I think, like, you are finally getting to a point that feels, like, more grounded and more balanced in, like, where you actually are, and is less willing to kind of, like, jump ship from that to, whatever new flicker of an opportunity might come up. Like, it's not as appealing as it was. Which I think is interesting. And I think that kind of, I'm starting to see, like, what, like, the initial messages were. But I am a little curious about the whole, like, Robin Hood thing. So how does this play in? Because this feels like a career read, for sure. But unless your career is thieving. Alright, we've got the Nine of Cups, the Hermit, the Queen of Cups. I feel like there's one more, and the Four of Pentacles. So I feel like with this, whatever it is that you do for a career, or that you're, building as a career, is something that's, like, very sustaining to you. I think that's probably a confirmation as to, like, who this is for. Is you're either currently in a career that you find, like, very rewarding, very fulfilling, very, like, emotionally and personally balancing. And I think that, like, almost getting to that point of, like, realizing, like, I have done enough, and I am, in this place where I want to be doing what I'm doing. Maybe it's not completely full circle yet, but there's at least this sense of, like, being more grounded in it, and, like, being less willing to kind of jump ship at any moment. I think that, like, that is something that you can use, and you do use, to, like, give back to the people around you, and there's almost this, like, sense of, again, like, taking, with the Robin Hood metaphor, like, sort of taking from a place of stability and abundance and providing that to people or places that don't have that in abundance. And whether we're talking about actual material resources, or just, you work in some field where you being in a place of, like, personal stability and emotional fulfillment allows you to help other people, like, kind of a service profession thing. It does kind of feel like this almost this cycle of abundance, and then taking that abundance and projecting it out into the world, to those who don't necessarily have access to that. Because, like, with this Four of Pentacles here, that's, kind of, like, all about stability. We see this table set, and there's, like, these candles, these lights around it. And then with this Hermit that it kind of came out with, we see the Hermit has, like, a candle. It's a little hard to see with this light. Candle where his face should be. And he's, like, kind of, like, holding his hand out and, like, projecting that light outward. And I think, like, that's what you're doing by coming into a place of, like, greater stability. Is, like, you're the kind of person with this Queen of Cups here who, like, when your cup is full, then your next impulse is to say, like, how can I pour into someone else's? And I think that that's, like, really great. And this is, I think, like, representative of, honestly, like, a pretty long journey. Like, I'm getting that you may have been someone who was kind of told off, told off for some of your like ambitions in the past or some of the way that you show up. And I think that may have been what kind of like fueled some of this escapism. It fueled, some of these illusions about yourself, about your potential, and made you feel like I have to do something else, or I have to do better, or I have to, and this definitely feels like a sense of, whether or not you realize it, like your personal like acceptance of yourself and your emotions and like your heart. And I think the way that like drives you in a lot of these endeavors is something that like benefits a lot more people than you realize. It's not, you may feel a lot of times like you're the hermit, kind of reaching out here, shining a light in some sense, but it's like they kind of want me to remind you that, in a sense, like some people are seeing you as like, the Robin Hood too, as the person who makes things right in a sense and like helps other people to come back into balance and to have things that they would want in terms of like their own stability and happiness that maybe they've seen other people have, but like they didn't have for themselves. So I think that you may be someone who, is either some kind of like creative, like putting that out there, or someone who works with people who are not necessarily always in like great places, especially like emotionally, which, if you work with people in any capacity, any kind of service industry, I think that, people don't always show up as their best selves regardless. But this does feel like you are a light to more people than you know, specifically in your workplace endeavors, in your career. Like you may have picked the path that you picked because it was right for you. But I think a lot of other people are grateful that you did. Like more so than you know. We also got the Four of Wands, the Three of Wands, Judgment. I think there's one or two more. And the King of Swords. So I think that like this kind of this, like some of this balance, some of these realizations, some of this, we're so back, is honestly, it's like more progress and like a bigger milestone than you maybe even realize. But I think like realizing that and like realizing the truth of that is almost like going to allow you to even like take it to the next level. Like take it to the next level as far as like whatever you're doing. And almost like approaching that consciously, as opposed to, I'm getting like almost, like doing what you're doing in spite of whether or not it's successful, or in spite of, whether or not anyone, kind of believes in you or reciprocates that, but like realizing you are more successful than you realize, you are more stable than you realize, and you have the capacity to perpetuate that in greater and greater amounts, and you have the capacity to help people, really, just by showing up the way that you show up, just by bringing that sense of happiness and that sense of like balance. And I think like being aware of that with like Judgment is kind of gonna allow you, I think, to almost like the way they're giving it to me is more strategically apply that truth, and more almost like have more appreciation and like awareness, especially on a mental level, of who you are and your ability to stand in that power. Like, yes, you are someone who has a really big heart, and you're someone who works really hard. But I think you're also someone who like has the capacity to almost like I'm getting like alter the environment around you in positive ways more than you know. And I think other people see it. And I think in some cases, like, don't necessarily tell you because they assume that you must already know. But I think that, like, knowing that and fully integrating that, like, there's like a whole new world of possibilities here. But, like, any more information for this collective in their career endeavors? Apparently, yes. We've got the Tower, the Two of Cups, Four of Swords, Nine of Wands, the High Priestess, the Five of Cups, and the King of Pentacles. This is like an interesting mix here. But it does feel very much like I'm getting like at long last, because it's interesting the way that the energy is kind of played out in this reading is, you know, like each kind of like line or spread of cards that I've got is felt like almost like a timeline, you know, almost like a journey in and of itself. And this kind of feels similar to where I think that having these like realizations, these revelations about yourself, about the way that you show up, I think is going to like break down some other, honestly, even like energetic barriers within yourself. And I think the first thing that is going to do is like create this greater sense of balance between the times when you're really like exhausted, sticking it out, and like the times of rest. With the like Two of Cups, Four of Swords, Nine of Wands, instead of like feeling like I think you're kind of like cycling between like burnout and recovery, feeling like you're actually just kind of like maintaining better, like balanced better. And I think also having a more intuitive understanding and acceptance of the things that didn't work out and the things that maybe you lost or the opportunities. And I think feeling more secure in grieving those because you're coming from the place of like the King of Pentacles and the High Priestess, which that's someone who's successful, but not by accident. They're successful because whether or not, you know, that was consciously aware that this is someone who followed their intuition. This is someone who adhered to that path even when there were some losses, there was some grief. And I think that there's something here about like allowing space for that. Like, you know, celebrate the strength of your intuition, and that knowing, and the fact that even when other people maybe didn't believe in you, you know, you followed it. And, you know, celebrate the stability that you have been able to claim since then. And the ways that, you know, you've been able to kind of like, I'm getting like grounding. I think that there's a lot here about, I think your intuition being connected to like being a very authentic and grounded version of yourself. Cause like when we started this reading, like we were talking a lot about like this tendency towards escapism and how you've been really working to like balance that out. And so I think that like that, like the result of that is like the ability to access both stability and intuition at the same time, you know, and there's still like grief there, I think, for time lost, for opportunities that were, you know, even if you know they were never meant to work out, you know, there's still like this kind of bittersweet mosaic, I think, of emotion that comes with any kind of milestone, that comes with any kind of realization, that comes with any kind of success. And I think that like you are moving towards like greater success and moving towards greater balance. So just make sure that you leave yourself room for all the emotions and all of the opportunities and all of the light that you bring to yourself and to others. We got the sun on the bottom of the deck. There's some bright and beautiful things in store, and I think there's some bright and beautiful things that are already here. So congratulations and best of luck with it.